Alright, let's watch this video.
One of the most important aspects of creating media and content is often where the creator's inspiration is derived from. Plenty of art is inherently inspired by something, whether it be an event within the life of the creator or simply taking something that works and using it as a base. Where this becomes an issue is when the line between inspiration and ripoff becomes blurred. We've all seen our fair share of Minecraft and Fall Guys ripoffs, not sponsored, as well as how AAA studios will try to make their 30th looter shooter off the back of Destiny's success. Where a game like Gotham Knights or the now defunct Last of Us 2 factions will see the live service model as easy billions, titles like Celeste will see the potential in previous works and successfully iterate on top of them. What matters most is whether
God, Celeste was such a good game.
a game is good enough to shake off the allegation of being a clone or ripoff, sometimes accidentally surpassing the original in the process.
Hold on, aside from Holocure, what's a ripoff, a quote-unquote ripoff, that's actually better than the original? I wonder.
Vampire Survivors is a game that wears its inspiration on its sleeve while simultaneously managing to be a pioneer for its hyper-niche genre. Vampire Survivors, despite its popularity, is not necessarily a new
League of
concept
Legends?
developed.
Oh yeah, actually you're so right. League of Legends actually came off as a ripoff. Like it was a ripoff of the mod from Dota. Yeah. Genshin. Oh shit, yeah, Genshin as well. Genshin was literally a fucking Breath of the Wild ripoff. And somehow they're more successful and yeah, holy shit. Okay, interesting.
For Luca Galante's game
Nah,
has been
Dota better. I mean, you have your opinions, right? I just think League is better because it's a type of video game that personally fits my sort of style.
cited as taking inspiration from iOS game Magic Survival. And even then, Vampire Survivors is very reminiscent of other old twin-stick shooters like Geometry Wars or I Made a Game with Zombies in it. What separates Vampire Survivors and Magic Survival from other twin-stick games is the reversal of the formula. Other twin-stick shooters often focus on the player dodging increasingly complex enemies and bullet patterns. At most, you get a few power-ups while your enemies functionally become Toho bosses. In Vampire Survivor, rather than dodging dozens of enemies and millions of bullets on screen, you are the gun. Stacking several weapons and power-ups in these games can very quickly lead to an absolute visual vomit on the screen. With the player model barely being visible behind a bunch of fireworks and spinning sides,
Yeah.
the controls are also pretty simple.
Anybody that's watching that shit would not understand what it means. That's the problem with, I think, Vampire Survivors and Holocure. It feels like it's fucking like a dumpster fire of like random sprites and assets and visuals. Anybody who doesn't understand how it works actually gets confused. That's actually what happened to me.
To capitalize on this. The only real decision in combat is where you're moving, while the weapons largely use themselves. The simple formula disintegrates any barrier for entry, as the fundamental gameplay boils down to trying your best not to run into enemies, something most players can probably understand they have to do. This is coupled with the experience gain and item unlocks, which both have a very visceral sense of gratification, not unlike going to a casino and hitting a jackpot. The sound effect
There's
of
a
picking up
DC?
EXP or
DLC?
unlocking a chest or waiting for an item to drop is addicting, and being able to get that dopamine from a $5 game beats the hell out of spending $500 at a slot machine. Runs in Vampire Survivor are also relatively short and satisfying, leading to a very one more run mentality in players who don't realize they've already sunk their last 5 hours into playing.
Yeah, that's
Further
what
by the
happened to
prospect of
Holocure.
unlocking new weapons or items to have even crazier runs. None of this is to say that Vampire Survivors isn't complex, as its simple gameplay allows for Galante to subvert expectations and create extremely unique unlocks and Easter eggs throughout. This can largely be felt through the unlockable relics in the game, which range from cosmetic or musical changes to being able to spawn more items in the overworld or unlock different game modes altogether. The Arcana system being just one of several which completely change the way you approach every run after it's unlocked. Vampire Survivors 1 hour in is barely recognizable to how your run's gonna look 100 hours in. This isn't even getting into the depth to be found in different stages, characters, and weapons or items, which do a lot towards making the game feel extremely fresh, despite however many hours you've already put into it.
I saw a comment in chat. If I remember correctly, there's also an H game that is in this category. I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about Glory and Miserable Survivors. Don't ask me why I know.
It. For me, the game only really started to falter around 90 hours in, which is the highest praise I can give to a game that I thought would start off very simple and small. Galante's team has also done a fantastic job of supporting the game, with updates being frequent and sizable from its drop on early access in December 2021 all the way to now. Galante and the rest of his team have also been incredibly transparent, with roadmaps and announcements explaining what the future of the game hold or why content may sometimes face a lull. Since being released, Vampire Survivors has functionally become the picture-perfect example of indie game development, with a team that respects its fan base and have only continued putting out more of what the people want.
Yeah.
So then, why isn't it my favorite Vampire Survivor-like anymore?
Yeah.
Holocure Save the Fans is a vampire...
What's the title? Glory and Miserable Survivors. Hey, I'm not gonna pin it. I'm not gonna pin it in the chat. Boom. If you wanna play it, go play it. I'm just saying, it's out there, and the gallery is actually pretty good. The gallery is pretty good.
Survivor-like game developed by Caillou, based around the Hololive series of VTubers. For those unaware, VTubers are the funny anime streamers who occasionally pop up on your feed saying funny words or getting into drama.
Thank you.
A lot. Holocure is not even remotely shy about the fact that it's inspired by Vampire Survivors, a game that was hugely popular with the aforementioned streamers.
Yeah.
But that is by no means an indictment of Holocure.
There was an entire there was like Vampire Survivors was basically fucking everyone, every single VTuber in JP was playing, even in Ijisanji.
In much the same way Vampire Survivors iterated on top of the formula set up by Magic Survival, Holocure changed the game by adding more buttons. Holocure added features such as aiming, special abilities, and strafe movement, which again all sound very simple on the surface, but immediately
It's
set the feel of
effective as
Holocure
fuck.
apart from its contemporaries. I'm sure we've all seen runs of Vampire Survivor which boil down to being so powerful that you could just kind of stand there, and I think what stops Holocure from feeling that way is both the aiming mechanics and how long runs are. By having 20-minute runs be the standard, it's much easier to hop in and out of runs quickly and seamlessly, especially due to this helping pace the game so you never really reach that standstill endgame. Having to aim most of your weapons also means that you're largely forced to keep yourself engaged. To get the most out of your build, you often need to play actively. Being able
I
to
feel
aim
like
your
we're missing a key point here. We're also playing as a cute anime girl, and them doing cute, funny shit.
weapon actually wasn't a standard for every character initially, but it eventually became so important to the game that Caillou actually implemented aiming for almost every projectile-based character. And trying to avoid aiming just kind of doesn't work for most characters. Very few characters allow you to AFK while the game plays itself, and for those types of characters, it's largely intentional rather than accidental. And Holocure's handling of characters is what largely sets it apart from the original, with each idol having their own weapon, special, and 3 skills unique to them. One of the biggest complaints with Vampire Survivors is that once you unlock a couple of the strongest...
It's pretty much the same fucking thing, and the sprites are not appealing. Meanwhile, we have bunch of cute girls. I think that's an important pack factor. I think so, at least.
Is that once you
I have no knowledge of gameplay mechanics, but I think in terms of aesthetic, Holocure just wins by a fucking mile, and I think that's part of the reason why it has such a massive broad appeal.
A couple of the strongest characters, the older ones start to feel largely irrelevant, an issue which Holocure will likely never run into. While not all characters are created equal, each of them have aspects that set them apart and cannot be transferred between one another. While Vampire Survivors allows every character that isn't Mortasio to eventually unlock the bone, you can't give Amelia's gun to Ollie. This means that your favorite character will boil down to playstyle preference rather than a single attribute which can largely be replicated.
Yeah.
This is furthered by the unique nature of many items in Holocure,
I know, Nano
which
Spam.
often allow you to build into specific paths. You can make your character a glass cannon or a heal bot or some mixture of the two, just to name some options. The changes to Holocure's gameplay also open up a plethora of options for the developer to iterate within the runs themselves.
Hi, Mel.
When it comes to the base game modes, Holocure is notably more difficult than Vampire Survivor, with enemies becoming much harder within any given run, as well as throughout the various stages the player can unlock. Personally, Holocure enemies progress in a far more organic way than Vampire Survivors, with most of the threat in Vampire Survivors just kind of being screen overload. While Holocure initially copies the screen overload difficulty of its predecessor, this feels far more intentional. Caillou designed the stages to smoothly transition Vampire Survivors fans and newer players from simple avoid the enemy mechanics to much more involved bullet hell-esque gameplay. This also allows players to adapt and improve at their own flow.
So the bullet hell, I love my Toho games. So the bullet hell elements actually made it so much deeper. They're so fucking based for that.
As the player can just choose a stage that better correlates with the difficulty they're seeking. Difficulty isn't everything to an enjoyable game, but I find the difficulty curve in Holocure giving me much more reason to keep coming back to it compared to Vampire Survivors. Where the glamour of becoming overpowered eventually runs dry in Vampire Survivors, Holocure instead stays fresh by always having some greater difficulty or objective to climb towards. It should be noted that Holocure also has an upgrade system akin to Vampire Survivors.
I don't know about that last point. I feel like Holocure eventually, when you spend like 100 fucking hours, right? And you hit a wall, I feel like it eventually hits that wall. Yeah.
particularly in how technically both of them have an endless grinding sort of system to power up each character, with the chief difference being the cap on all character upgrades. Rather than in Vampire Survivors where the golden egg system just kind of feels like a big time sink, in Holocure the G rank and fan rank makes it fun and engaging to get money and level your favorite character without ever reaching the ridiculous heights that the golden eggs do. Also, I just like grinding for the outfits and character designs more. I just think they're neat.
Yeah.
Holocure.
Thank you. He mentioned it very late. Yeah. The aesthetic, I think, plays a very huge factor.
Is also one of the strangest fan games I've seen, due in large part to the overwhelming amount of people who just don't know it's a fan game. It's not as though Holocure does a bad job of referencing and showing appreciation for the brand, since nearly every single item is a reference in some way or another to some meme or VTuber or something with the audience. Rather, I think it shows how powerful quality can actually be for a brand or product. I could tell any of my friends to play this game if I think they'd be into it, and I guarantee most of them would at least somewhat enjoy it, despite many of them not watching Hololive content.
Yeah.
For some folks, this is the best way to get into VTubing in the genre, since it shows how much love and dedication fans are willing to put into their favorite IP. Holocure is almost an anomaly in this case.
Yeah. And you know the reason why? Do you know the reason why, chat? Because this isn't even like sucking on Hololive's cock or anything, or even Hololive fans. It's because literally fucking Hololive fans, how do I want to say this without being sucky? Hololive fans are just cracked. They're just super cracked compared to like most fan bases. I don't know. I've been around multiple fandoms, right? Dedicated, more than dedicated. Like, I've been around multiple fandoms, right? I really have. But I've never seen a much more passionate fan base in like a micro niche than Hololive fans. I never have. And it's like, any person can dismiss that, but when you try to think about it, I don't think there is. We're like way too dedicated to a point that it's autistic at some point. Yeah. I feel like we go a little too hard, but at the same time, that's kind of base, that's kind of huge. They have some of the best people. They really do. Hololive fans have like probably the most talented people that are in this industry right now. Like Mazumaro, primarily a Hololive fan, is the one that's getting like commissioned by a shit ton of smaller VTuber. Anything that comes out of a Hololive fan is like sought out by all VTuber agencies. That's just what happens. Yeah. Jesus. The good side of parasocialism? Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people overlook that. Like, passion is something that Hololive and like VTuber and idol fans have a game that's that's unbeatable. They really do. Hololive fans are as passionate as Sonic fans. They both have their entire groves of fans that make their own games. There are so many Sonic fan games that make an expo. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I'm just talking about this from a relative point of view. Probably because there's just too... yeah, maybe I am saying this out of bias, by the way. It's just that I have seen so much fucking work being made by like actual Hololive fans, and like not too much done by fans that are outside Hololive. There's always an overlap. People need to stop equating autistic with talented. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's just that it's funny. Because cover encourages and compensate these fans unlike any color. Well, there's that, and the fact that, like, they just encourage much more positivity, you know? I don't know. I feel like that's something that I actually have to, like, look into more. Why is it that Hololive fans are like this compared to, like, every other VTuber fan base? I mean, Hololive being like the biggest VTuber agency is not it. It's not it. In fact, the smaller the community, the more passionate it's supposed to be. But in Hololive, that's not the case. I feel like I really have to study that. I really do. It's the idol thing. Yeah, idol culture definitely plays a part. 100%. 100%.
Almost separate from its origin as a fan game in the first place. Where people know AM2R as a Metroid fan game or Black Mesa as a Half-Life fan game, Holocure is simply known as Holocure. If anything, I more often see people talk about Vampire Survivors and comparing the two as a selling point to the game, rather than its status as a fan game, almost allowing it to surpass any stigma that might be attached to the title of being a fan game. It does help that the game is free to play, and Caillou's reasoning for wanting to keep the game purely as a passion project without attaching monetization has kind of accidentally made the game much more charming for me. Many people would be glad to throw money at the game to support its development, as seen by how many people actually just ask to give the game money. There's a level of dedication to both the game and fandom as a whole that is immensely commendable. By keeping the game as a personal hobby, Caillou, deliberately or not, has directly aided in spreading a beneficial image for Hololive that's purely positive. For people who use Holocure as a jumping off point towards the greater VTubing scene, one of the best fan creations being free only begs the question of what other high quality content is out there, and how much are fans
there's
willing
a
to do
lot.
just to support their favorite creators.
There
without
is
thinking
a
about money.
fucking lot.
In this way, I actually think Holocure harks back to a time in fan and indie game culture where folks made titles largely just to say, I made this. A behavior which largely feels absent in present internet spheres. This might just be my nostalgia talking, and smaller indie games aren't.
No, that's real. That's real. And I feel like it's because like the economy and like the world situation doesn't allow for that sort of shit to happen anymore. At least not as much. But Hololive fans are different. Well, not Hololive fans. VTuber fans are different because like for some reason, most Hololive fans or not Hololive. Why do I keep saying Hololive fans? A lot of VTuber fans are like actually financially stable people. I have no idea.
Dead by any means, but it feels as though there was a shift at some point towards wanting to chase a sort of high associated with being the best rather than simply making stuff for the sake of making it. A lot of this stems from the idea that without doing what has already been proven to work, you won't see successful numbers others might, so it can kind of be tempting to just copy and paste whatever you like. This can be felt particularly well with massive communities such as Five Nights at Freddy's, Undertale, Friday Night Funkin', to name a few, where there are plenty of fan games or derivative titles that aren't necessarily bad, but just kind of bone it in. I think there's a lot more merit to mediocre or even just bad.
Yep, I make over 100k. I hope you're joking. I mean, I hope you're not kidding. If you're not, give me money.
Game,
thank you, Arturo.
Which took efforts to iterate on a formula over a bunch of polished copies of the same game that's already been made for the last 10 years. At the end of the day, if someone just copies what's already been made, why wouldn't I just play the original if I wanted that? If the goal from the offset is just to make Vampire Survivors again, but better, to cash in on the hype, then it just adds to a growing oversaturation that we see with most popular game genres.
Yeah,
a person
that
doesn't
makes
have
sense.
to make an entirely new or never before seen style of game to show off their creativity either.
I've
As
given you
many of the
plenty,
most
fam.
critically
I
acclaimed
know.
Indie games are just people taking games they liked as kids or adults and just kind of adding their own spin to it. It is through the act of wanting to implement certain ideas into those games that we truly see the difference between a shining success or just kind of a dull clone. This is largely where so much of my praise for Holocure stems from. I would call Holocure unique in the same way that Shovel Knight or Stardew Valley are unique. Taking ideas that have been proven to work and mashing them in a way that feels familiar that no one else has really thought up before. A game doesn't have to be extremely original and groundbreaking in order for you to be able to appreciate the many efforts developers put in.
True.
With Holocure, Caillou succeeded towards representing a property he clearly loves and cherishes with a game that many enjoy. It's usually for the best to just make a creation out of passion or enjoyment for one's inspiration, and if they happen to make it again but better, then that's more of a happy accident. And if there are any
Yeah, no, 100%. 100 fucking percent. God. I wish this guy became a Hololive fan. Is he a Hololive fan? Not a Hololive fan. At least not yet. You will be. You will be. Get into the rabbit hole, bitch. Come over here.
One of the most important aspects
I will
of creating
drag you kicking and screaming. And you will come out. You will come out brainwashed and not want to watch more VTubers. Yes. Link the video? Okay. Have some Grove Fairy for a few days or